Welcome everyone back to the Wenke podcast, and today my guest is Luke Raynham. And thanks for coming on, man. And tell us a little bit about what you do. What are you up to?
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. So I think most of my time, I'd say 95% of my time is spent on my business. And my business is doing a lot of social media content. It's called Personify. So it's social media marketing with an emphasis on talking head videos. So videos like this, but also, editing content, uploading content, social media management, website building, all these things. But the core of our business is really social media content. So most of my time is that. And when I'm free, lots of reading and lots of strategizing. I've had to remove myself from, the technical side of the business and start thinking about how to run it from a strategic point of view. So that's most of my time. I do 7 days a week usually with the business. I don't socialize much. I don't go out much. I'm in that phase of my life right now, or perhaps just a self-induced phase, rather than some random phase that everyone goes through of just wanting to work. Wanting to just build this business, just build this thing, and the drive of that. So that's me in a nutshell, bro.
Pretty cool. How long have you been building the business?
Great question, man. I started doing content back end of 2020, I would say. So almost 2 years and a half I've been doing content for. And the reason that's relevant to when I started the business is because the business started organically, in the sense that I didn't actively pursue it. I didn't say to myself, here's a business plan, and from March 1st, I'm going to execute plan A, B, C. I mean, rarely do people do that, right? But point being is that I started doing content back at the end of 2020, and it was crap to begin with, like all things are when people start. Mind you, it was okay, but it wasn't amazing. And I kept doing it, just kept going every single day. Then the pandemic came in Australia. For any international folks who aren't in Australia, you might have seen in the news how stringent and severe the lockdowns were here. It was about 10 months that we were, I could be exaggerating there, but I'm just going to say 10 months as a memory from when it was, because I wasn't vaccinated, and therefore it was longer for me, which, again, we get into the politics of all that. But long story short, I was inside for a long time, and I was doing some work part-time and had some savings. So I just, every single day, my goal was just to make content. And I did every single day, with the exception of a few days here and there. I just did it every single day. And I just went crafty with it, every single meticulous detail, every little thing here, every little thing there. So I became a bit of a scientist / artist, the balance of the two when you can. And I kept building, and then people started reaching out to me saying, I love your content. What do you do to do this? And I'm like, hang on a second, there's something here. So I started charging for it, and I started charging more. And then people were like, I don't want to do content. Can you do it for me? So I started doing that. And then next thing you know, it's actually quite a funny story. My friend was in my room, and I'd moved out, and I had to borrow money. I was like, dude, I need some money, man. I was doing something else at the time. I was trying to do some Patreon thing or something like that. Like, bro, I need some money. He's like, dude, I'll just pay you for content. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, here's the money right now. He just sends it to me. Because don't worry about lending, just make me content. I'm like, okay. So I just started making it, and wow. The next thing you know, then he referred someone and didn't get them, but then someone else saw I was doing that, and there was already social proof there. People had seen that I had reached 100,000 people on some Facebook post, other ones here and there. They'd seen how meticulous I was, and they knew I was a person. They're like, yep, I'll do it straight away. So then I had 3 people on board, and then 4, and then here we are. So to answer your question, I started the business officially, I guess you could say, in October last year. And I've been growing since then. So, and here we are.
Sweet. And here we are. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. You touched on the fact that, when you started, your content was pretty rough, which as with anything new, that inevitably happens. And I remember about 2 months ago, I started doing jiu-jitsu. Are you familiar with Brazilian jiu-jitsu at all?
I am.
Yeah, and it's quite So I was pretty big into working out. So like the physical part wasn't intimidating to me, but it was a completely foreign concept, this idea of trying to literally strangle another person. And I was horrible. So I mean, every time I would, roll with someone, fake fight or whatever it's called, I would get strangled. And it's kind of an extreme version of this idea of slowly improving at things, and this idea that you're inevitably going to be bad at whatever you start to do, and you just have to get past that point of being bad, and then slowly 1% every day, by increment, you get better. And jiu-jitsu is like the perfect example for me, because you being bad means that you're literally getting choked out. So it's somewhat of a comical example, but it's also very true. And you notice that with content creation, but nonetheless, it's sticking with it. It's the fact that regardless of the things that came up, the challenges, the setbacks, and in this case, COVID in some ways was probably a setback, but also kind of it forced you in a certain way to focus. Through all those, you have to continue to go, and it's not an easy thing to do. One of the strategies that I like to do is I like to recognize that there's a cost for taking an action, but there's also a cost for not taking an action. So it's both action and inaction. And Jordan Peterson kind of articulated this idea to me of a cost for action and a cost for inaction. And whenever I think about trying something new or going outside my comfort zone, I think about, well, I'm going to miss out on all the benefits that this potentially has for me. And that's going to be a big cost that I'm going to bear. So it kind of helps motivate me from a psychological perspective to pursue something new. What do you think about that idea of you're going to have a cost whether you pursue something or whether you don't?
Yeah, we'll address that. I just wanted to say something first before I do. I think that what's so important about consistency isn't so much the, how would you say, the narrowing of the path to one direction, but rather it's realizing all the parts of the journey, right? So the pathways here, all the mountains, all the scenery around you that isn't relevant to the stimuli, meaning that isn't relevant to you to get to a certain point. Now, what I mean by that is when I speak to people who are new clients and they want to start making content, they're talking to me about things that aren't relevant, right? They're talking about things that it's not their fault. They're just not on that path yet. They're not there yet, right? So they're talking about things that are like for example, I want to launch a podcast, but I need to figure out what music I'm going to put at the start. It's like, yeah, that's an important thing, but on the grand scheme of the whole thing, there's way more important things than that. It's like I can't count how many podcasts are so popular that have no intro music, or have terrible intro music, or have terrible video quality, or terrible scripting, or terrible, just like, how would you say, all the factors of quality as far as it goes to the visual eye aren't there, but yet the subject matter is so powerful and is so potent that it overrides all that. So in short, when it comes to consistency, to tie it back into your question, the empowerment of consistency isn't that you're doing something and you're realizing the cost of inaction, but it's also that you're learning how to obtain mastery, right? And mastery comes from removing that field of vision. It's like having a camera and you change the settings to blur the background and to make it focused on one part. That's what action is, in one direction. And so much of my journey has been like, I was focusing in some cases 3 or 4 days doing a carousel post, a sliding Instagram post, and I was focusing all that time on creating this one graphic that was a powerful, amazing, artistic graphic, when really what's the most important thing is the words you write. You can do a black background with white text. In fact, it's probably more beneficial to do that because that has been shown to be the most visually standing out kind of way of reading text, right? Black, then white. Boom, you read it. So what's more powerful is the text itself, not the graphics. So I think that's the biggest part of taking action. It's realizing that the mission isn't so hard and you're just stumbling over the shoelaces.
Yeah, and that narrowing process of determining what information is relevant to your end goal and what information you're focusing on that doesn't benefit you getting there. That's pretty important too, in terms of, and then also specifying the goal. A lot of people fail to even specify the goal. You know, what exactly are we trying to do here? And without that specification process, how are you going to hit something that you aren't even aware of what you want to hit? Now, that shouldn't stop you from trying, but you also should have a certain level of an aim, and articulated it in a way that you can get behind. So, yeah, I'm with you. That's an interesting perspective. There we go.
I was going to say, I think that what's most important is, and this comes from a self-awareness piece, perhaps more objectively rather than subjectively, but I mean specifically, it depends on what personality type you have as well. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're, again, you know, we spoke earlier before this call about conscientiousness, right? If someone is, I wouldn't say naturally, but their proclivity is towards a more conscientious personality type, they don't have to necessarily, quote unquote, set a goal, right? Now, what I mean by that is, I'm not saying that I am or I'm not conscientious, because I did the test a long time ago. I don't know if it's still relevant now, but long story short, I don't necessarily set goals. I just literally jump onto something and I figure it out, and I just manage to stumble my way through it. So when people come to me and they want me to like solve them a problem for them, like, hey, can you build me a website? I never say no, because I know I can figure it out. So I don't set a goal of like, like go to Webflow and like learn how to make a website, or learn how to code, learn Python or whatever it might be, or HTML. I just say to myself, I'm like, I know I can do this. So it's a confidence in one's ability, right? And I don't mean ability in the sense of like what you have achieved in the past, not just that. I mean also like who you are and your proclivities are. Like, are you low in neuroticism? Like, how easy is it for you to get stressed or burnt out? And again, there's many contributing factors to this. This is why I believe isn't right about the Big Five personality test. It's that they're influenced so much. Like, for example, if your health is poor, if you're having extreme gut health issues and your tolerance to stress is decreased by 10x, it's like, how can you say you're a neurotic person? You just have health problems. So, you know, I think it's important to recognize that goal setting is relevant when it is and when it isn't, and to use your personality as the crutch to determine the answer to that question.
Yeah, personality is huge. I became fascinated in the personality research and the literature and how it affects you when I first discovered Jordan Peterson, who we both are a fan of. And he actually took his test, and the conscientiousness piece was really interesting for me to recognize, because one way that I describe conscientiousness to people is that it's not necessarily that you love to work, it's that if you're not working, you feel miserable. So there's an element of it's somewhat comical, but I actually, when I first heard him say that and like articulate it in that way, it like clicked for me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why I can't sit still. That's why doing something that I don't perceive to be productive is so hard for me. And it's manifested itself in some interesting ways. And one way is that I have a weird relationship with vacations, where like,
so do I.
They're both something that I look forward to, but they're also something that in some ways I can't stand, because just sitting on a beach with a margarita, I can do it for like a day, but come day 3, I start to go a little stir crazy. So it's useful to know that about yourself, and then calibrate what you're doing in life, who you are as a person, your goals, etc., around that. So it's interesting that you brought that up. And that's been a big piece for me. So
yeah, it's been a you know, like anything in life, there's a shadow and a light side to everything, and you know, we can get into the specifics of that. But
yep.
You know, for one being high in conscientiousness, like, and obviously it manifests different for everyone, because no one's singularly the same based on 5 metrics. But for me, like, I always again, same as you, like, I have no qualms working on Sundays when all my friends or everyone's out at a party. Like, to me, like, I'm at the party and like, sure, it's a great time. And again, there's also, again, so there's personality types, there's like your, you know, let me just scale that back for a second. I want to talk about this in relation to something else,
Sure.
and I'll tie it back in. But there's a book called Behave, right? And it's relevant to this, right, for anyone listening. And it talks about the way that he approached this book, right, was he didn't just say, like, behaves about human nature, right? He doesn't say, this is human nature, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He spoke about human nature, and it's by Robert Sapolsky. He spoke about human nature in terms of time, right? So the first chapter is on neurochemistry, or neuroscience, I should say, more broadly. So what is the 0 to 1 second response to a stimulus? Like, I'm talking to you right now, I'm using my voice, I'm speaking to you. Then next after that, it's endocrinology. What is the, I'm getting the times wrong here, but just catch the theme, not the specifics, is, what happened in the 60 minutes to 3 hours. Then after that, it's like, it could have been maybe your upbringing. So what influenced the last 3 or 4 months of your life? And then talking about what's that topic? Anthropology, but about human nature, anyways,
Darwinism, evolutionary biology.
More specifically, it's like evolutionary biology. So how us as humans, that first layer of the brain influences that. Now to tie that all in, so your personality type is going to be relevant to those parts as well. You're not just a singular box that exists in time and space based on on 5 characteristics. So coming full circle, sorry for that tangent there, but so
you're good.
With me, like working 7 days a week, again, it's relevant to the season of your life and what's going on in your life and your circumstances and things. But for the most part, 7 days a week of work is exciting to me. It's exhilarating, and I prefer to do that over anything else. And I'd also challenge those who are listening that perhaps denying that part of themselves, whether it be a positive or a negative, to really tap into that and to also notice the things that surround it. Like the sun is the center of our universe, so to speak, and the planets circulate around that. What characteristics circulate around the core tenets of who you are? So yeah.
No, that's a very good point. That's an interesting book. I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, so, Behave by Robert Sapolsky, if anyone listening as well.
Cool. Yeah, and of course, just a set of personality types or knowing that isn't, the end-all be-all. But I have found it very useful, so it's something that I highly recommend everyone tries out. And Jordan Peterson has a really good one, his Big 5 personality test, and it gives you kind of like a full report on each of them and explains them and how it might affect you. And you can even match it with a significant other, and it'll give you like a relationship report and like how it interacts, and that's just fascinating stuff. So highly recommend that. So this 7 days a week thing is, for a lot of people, that's somewhat of a foreign concept. And in the context of this conversation, it's not like, I wouldn't say that you or I are saying everyone needs to do this. I certainly wouldn't say that. But everyone's going to have a different desire and capacity for work. Everyone's going to have a different amount of work in a day, in a week, in a month that's optimal for them. And finding that is huge. And there's this idea of like work-life balance, work and play. And for some people, it's going to require more play, and for some people, it's going to require more work. And I would say for you and I, being busy isn't seen as a negative. It actually fuels me up for the most part. Now, there is this concept of burnout, and I'm curious what you think about this, because back to Jordan Peterson, because I love his stuff, he talked about in your 20s and your 30s working as hard as you can on something and kind of finding your limit. Now, this is a great process and a great thing to do, and I've experimented with this myself, but you can run into the potential of burning out and overdoing something. And I think that risk is baked into the cake. It's part of the deal, so to speak, but it is something to be aware of. Have you encountered that at all? Have you ever had to take a step back in a proactive manner? What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, well, just addressing the first part of what you said, I think that it's important to note that, if you have a goal of who you want to be and what you want to do in life, and there's a certain image or not image, but a certain vision that you have for your life, I think it's important to note like who you are and where you want to get, and try and find somewhere in the middle, right? And what I mean by that is like you are who you are to a degree, and then also you have goals that are outside of you, hence why they're goals, otherwise they would be you. So it's like just knowing who you are and meeting yourself in the middle, right? I think the specifics are important there. As far as the burnout thing goes, so I would break that down into like, what does one mean by limits? And when I say that, I mean specifically, when you reach a limit, why are you reaching that limit? Now, the reason I ask that question is because, let's say, for example, you want to do 16 hours a day, right? So you do 16 hours a day and you notice after 4 hours that sitting in the same position on your chair makes your legs feel tingly, or like I know it sounds weird, but you feel hunched over, or your posture's bad, or your jaw starts hurting. So one would consider that, and again, this is about, for me, like one of my pet peeves is, pet peeves meaning just a colloquial term, not necessarily that it bothers me too much, but just for the sake of using words, is low resolution thinking, right? So let's go higher than that. Let's go higher. So what I mean by that is high resolution thinking would then bring up, why is one reaching that limit? So you're sitting down at your desk, you're working away, you're doing these things, and like you start getting sore, you start getting fatigued, and you're like, oh, there's my limit. I tried that challenge, and here's my limit. It's like, okay, let's be intelligent about this. Let's work to our limit, but let's also understand what the limit is and why, and use that as a proxy for improvement. So if I'm sitting here and I'm feeling that experience of a sore back, whatever, maybe I purchase a stand-up desk. Maybe I turn the lights on above me. It's been shown to increase wakefulness. Maybe and whether or not you believe in this is another story because it's contentious to science, maybe there's EMFs around me. Maybe I'm not getting enough sunlight throughout the day, right? Again, that could be a break, not so much working. But these are the questions. And to add to that as a way like to think about it, also on top of that as well, like how is my gut health? How are the foods that I'm eating, right? So I would say challenge the limit in as, can I move it forward? Can I make the limit longer based on lifestyle choices? Now, whether or not Jordan Peterson meant that when he put that challenge forth, I assume he did, but I think it's important to note. So that's the first part. I think you need to challenge your limits and know the limits and why they're there. It's like you don't just see the wall and say, oh, there's a wall here, better turn around. It's like, why is this wall here? And to get into that, you can kind of break down the universe, so to speak. You don't want to get too much into it, but for sake of conversation at least. But why is the wall here? Like, why does the wall exist in the first place? What is it supposed to do? What's its utility? How gets out? What's my goal? Yada yada, and so forth. So, to answer your question, yes, I have run into burnout. In fact, I burnt myself out to the point where I had 4 things going on, and this is the dark side of conscientiousness, so to speak. This is my dark side of conscientiousness, I should say. This is my thing. And sure. It's that when I feel stress, and perhaps maybe I'm slightly higher in neuroticism than most people, so I experience a bit more stress. But when I feel stress, I don't feel like, oh, stress, better stop, need a break. It's like, boom, more, push. And not even like an active, like, not even the verbalization in my head of, push, Luke, come on, you can do this. Not a motivational push on the accelerator, but purely like, I'm in. I'm just zoned in. I just go. That's what happens to me when I experience stress, right? And what occurs when you experience stress, and there's been multiple studies that have shown this. I'm happy to send them through to you. I'm actually I'm writing a script at the moment for a YouTube video on this. What happens when you experience stress is your body pulls away, how do you say, for lack of better terms, resources from your stomach and puts them into the muscles, into the heart. That's what stress does, right? So when that happens is your body, your stomach doesn't do the usual processes it usually does as efficiently as it should, which means then that bad bacteria start to grow, proliferation of bad bacteria, your gut lining then gets damaged, your mucus gets damaged, your your villi, which is the parts of the stomach, like the little V's that absorb the nutrients, gets damaged. And over time, if you compound that stress and there's not as much attention on the stomach, I'm using basic language here to get the point across, you then will experience stomach issues, right? So for me personally, I had overgrowth, so I started to spin out all the time. I was spinning out and like getting fatigued, having 8 hours sleep, then feeling fatigued the next day, spinning out, suicidal ideation, dark thoughts, all like just the whole list, to the point where if someone asks me like, what do you feel on a scale of 0 to 10, I'd say about 0.5. And it was so bad, and it was so awful that I was like, every single day, like there was something weird going in my body, like sharp pains in my chest, spinning out, like I mentioned before, sensitivity to photophobia, like sensitive to light. I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't do anything. I was literally like, I was fucked. Long story short, and this is the power of clarity, right? So I had my ideas or my hunches. I'm like, oh, I can't be stressed because I'm just, whatever. Like I'm just doing my thing. And I went through this journey, a bit of a spiritual journey. I was like, what am I not taking responsibility here for? Like, what am I missing here? And I said this on Harley's podcast as well. Like, where am I not taking responsibility for where I'm at right now? And I was taking responsibility. I was doing everything. I was trying all these different things. It's like, you're being arrogant. You're trying to find the solution within the own confines of your own body and head. You need a professional. So I saw someone, right? And this is the power of clarity. We did some tests. We did a GI mapping test to test my stomach. Turns out I had a damaged mucus, damaged gut lining, for those who use that terminology. My mucus lining in my gut was damaged. The villi in my stomach was inflamed. I was low in good bacteria, so my ratio of good to bad bacteria wasn't appropriate, wasn't how it should have been. And also had overgrowth of something called, I might butcher this, but Disyphilus piga, which is a bacteria that thrives on animal fats, right? So here I was, and this can go into a whole conversation about advice online. Here I was trying to have a meat-heavy diet, like I'm having autoimmune responses, let's try a meat-heavy diet, I don't want to do it. Lo and behold, I did a test, and the bacteria is thriving off animal fats. So again, to recap, I had an inflamed villi where food gets absorbed, I had overgrowth bacteria, I had not enough good bacteria, and I also had damaged mucus. Now all these things together, when I'm eating foods, I start spinning out. In some cases, I started hallucinating. And I started to just like losing my mind. This went on for like 6 months. And I was in a moldy house as well with mold, which I don't know if it contributed to it, but I'm pretty sure it did. So, and meanwhile, I'm building a business. I'm hiring people. I've got these clients. I'm sleeping like a couple of hours a night. Some nights I'm sleeping whole nights. A couple of hours a night, spinning out. People having conversations with me, and I'm like literally like spinning out. Like I'm literally spinning in circles, and they're having a conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, cool, nice. Pretending like I'm cool. And so this will happen from stress. Like this is how it essentially started. Of course, there's many other things like modern living and antibiotics, all those things. But the catalyst was every single day stress. Every single day, I need to get a post out. And no matter what, like didn't care what happened to my body, I would do anything to get that post out. I would do anything to like get the work done. So I'm sitting there trying to build this business, hiring people, dealing with like all the fucking fires that come up with the business, like clients saying this and getting unhappy and then having to deal with that, getting new leads, getting money coming in, sorting the finances out, invoicing, everything. And here I am spinning the fuck out. So, so long story short, I have experienced the burnout stress very severely. And I'm still managing it to this day. Like I've learnt the hard fucking way, Nate, like how to stop. I don't mean how to stop in like the function of get up and move. I mean how to mentally get myself to be like, I can't keep going. And I feel defeated. I'm like, how do I just move away from this? So now I just get up and if I'm feeling tired or exhausted, just go over the couch, just sit down. I can't do anything about it. What can I do? And the pain is so fucking severe that I have to do it. There's not a choice of like, oh, I better relax now. I've tried that before. I've tried the like, no, I'll just keep going. And I know where it leads. So yeah, I go through that all the time. It happens all the time. So to answer your question, yes, I have experienced the burnout.
Yeah, so long story short, yes. Fair enough. That is talk about a lesson learned. It's crazy how sometimes you're forced to those extreme scenarios because that's the only way that you're going to learn that lesson. And hopefully because of that, you can then recognize the signals in the future on when you're going down a path that's a bad idea.
Oh, I can notice it straight away.
A book. Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, it's a huge thing to know. Right when you're on that edge, or when something is tilting from productive to counterproductive. That's huge. Recognizing
Yes.
that. I read a book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. Are you familiar with this by chance?
Yep. Of course.
Yeah. Yep. And one of the most life-changing books I've ever read outside of like the religious dimension. From like a health perspective, this just completely changed my world. And I wanted to read off a couple statistics here just because I think they're so powerful. So and I guess I'll take one step back real quick. The context for this is partially what you just talked about, but also partially like I had this conception that if I really wanted to pursue something, or if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, or if I wanted to meet my goals, I should just sleep less, and I'll sleep when I'm dead, or I'll really push that priority of sleep lower on my list. And I tried this out, and it was rather unsuccessful. And then I found this book, and it explained why. So here are some statistics as to why that's a really bad idea. Routinely sleeping less than 6 hours a night can increase your risk of cancer by 50%. Men who only sleep 5 to 6 hours a night have a level of testosterone that's 6 to 10 years their senior. A lack of sleep also has a major impact on our ability to regulate weight. In fact, a Mayo Clinic study found that sleep-deprived individuals have an extra around 600 calories a day that they're consuming than their well-rested counterparts. And these are just a couple of the massive amounts of literature that there is on sleep. And for anyone that isn't familiar with Matthew Walker, highly recommend checking out his stuff. He's a genius. He's a really good speaker. He's been on a bunch of podcasts. He's been on Rogan. He's been on Peterson. Great stuff. But I remember reading this book, and I've had this a number of times, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, where your world is completely shifted by something like this book. And the whole sleep thing is an interesting part of this conversation too, because that mentality of like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead, oh, I'll not prioritize this, you're actually sabotaging your goal. Like if your goal is to be productive, the best way is not to go 20 hours a day with 4 hours of sleep. The best way for your future self, for a long-term perspective, is to actually take those breaks. And you've encountered that. You might think, oh, I'll just push through. Oh, I'll just keep going in this case. And yet that's actually compromising your ability from a long-term perspective to actually perform. So in the moment, it might feel like you're being more productive, but you're actually just shooting yourself in the foot. And this is a lesson that I've learned pretty well. And you're a fan of Matthew Walker? You're a fan of his book and whatnot?
I am.
Yep. What do you think about that idea of learning? Well, I suppose you've already talked about it to a certain degree, but learning to listen to what your body's telling you in terms of your limits and in terms of what's optimal and not optimal. And you're talking specifically about gut health, which is a fascinating little world that I didn't really even know about. But with sleep, with exercise, with all these things have to be calibrated from a long-term perspective. What do you think about stuff like exercise and sleep and relaxation, all these different things in the context of being productive as a whole?
Nice, man. Yeah, there's heaps of stuff to that. So for anyone listening, anyone out there, and you're someone who has a proclivity to work a lot, you can get more done and more things achieved, because quality is far better than quantity, right? Quantity and quality coexist together, but quality is always going to win at the end of the day. I don't mean like 30 minutes rather than 6-7 hours, like common sense here. What I mean specifically is you focus on quality work that is sustained quantity as well, and you get better results. And this is something that I've experienced firsthand. With sleep, right, I've had all types of insomnia, and by all types I mean the two types that I know about, which is sleep maintenance and sleep onset insomnia. Onset meaning you have a hard time falling asleep, sleep maintenance meaning you have a hard time staying asleep. And for me, like my biggest gift and my biggest curse is that I have a very active brain, right? So there's not one part of the day, and everyone has an active brain, everyone's thinking all the time, I get it, right? By active I mean specifically I will follow something to its core, at least to what I think is the core, until I can't. And that means with rumination, emotional rumination. It means with conversation. It means with all things. Of course I can switch it off. I'm not just that singular type of person. But the point being is that when I get in something, I'm in it, right? So whether it's a book, a TV series, whatever it is, I can't just say, oh, stop now, and then put it down. So the reason I'm saying this is because I would go to bed at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, up and down all over the place, just because I'm doing something that I'm obsessed with, is learning something or whatever it is. So this led me to really bad sleep stuff. So speaking into Matthew Walker, he said in his book, at the end of the book, on the last couple of pages, he gives like, I think 10, 15 tips on like summary of sleep. And the most important one that I think he mentions is consistency, right? So consistent sleep schedule is fucking so important. And for me, like, as soon as I started having a consistent sleep schedule, my sleep wasn't perfect because I had stuff going in my gut, which, by the way, affects your sleep dramatically. And I'll tell you more about this in a second. But consistency is the first part, right? So it's like the Jordan Peterson talking about, and now I'm bouncing around here, but it'll all come together in a second. Jordan Peterson talks about, cleaning your room, and perhaps it's overused these days. So cleaning your room isn't just about like meme, but it has, but it's a cliche, and cliches are important, right? And I think what's important about this specific cliche is that there are tangible things that you can do to better your life. And I mean tangible things, not just in the sense that they are like you can physically do them, but I mean also in the sense that they're easy and simple and straightforward. So something like going to bed consistent time, of course, is an emotional thing around that as well. That's one thing. If you can't do that, going to bed a consistent time that isn't the ideal time, 6 a.m. in the morning if that's you, 5 a.m. in the morning. If you're always like, I'm going to bed at 11 p.m., but it's like you just love the night. Like I love nighttime. I love staying up late. I love like that feeling of night. If that's you, then just aim for 3 a.m., right? There's a way to do it, right? So that's how important. And I mean, ritualistically as well, you talk about the ultradian rhythm with Andrew Huberman, who brought that to my consciousness, of working an hour and a half. That's the ideal amount of time that humans should work, right? Then take a break, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then start again. See how many of those you can do without your phone. Without your phone next to you, your phone away, hour and a half work. How many sessions of those can you do a day? It's fucking hard. And I don't mean hard as in like, oh, I gotta push a bit. Like, you get to that second or third, or even like some people get to fourth. For me, it's like that third. I'm like, I can't do this. Because the brain is not used to being like that. But it can get better over time if you learn to work with your body and work with what nature intended for you. So it's about having that balance of nature, and by nature I mean what is to be human in our natural state, and what is inorganic, being sitting in front of a computer all day. How can you balance those two out? Because your body will complement on both sides if you are able to do that. Now on the gut stuff, just so we're aware of how important the gut is, there's a bacteria in the gut, or lack thereof perhaps. About 91% of people don't have this in the Western world. Western world meaning where I am, Australia, America, UK, Ireland, Canada, and so forth. The English-speaking Western worlds, but you get my point. 90-something, or 91% I think it is, of people don't have this specific bacteria called Lactobacillus reuteri in their stomach. Now, Lactobacillus reuteri is responsible for helping your body to release oxytocin into your body, right? In addition to this Lactobacillus reuteri when it was found in people, or there was a high amount found in people in their gut microbiome, they were more inclined to have better quality sleep. They were more affectionate, more loving. They craved connection with people more. They craved intimacy with people more. They aged slower. They had more supple skin. And overall, they're more youthful, right? And I just want to preface that I think one of these studies was a mice study. Their fur was thicker. They aged slower, like I mentioned before. So this bacteria, right, and this is why personality type isn't everything. I know that we both agree on that, but I just want to run it home and I want to explain why. Mm-hmm. So this bacteria has died in most guts because of multiple things, but let's keep it simple. Urbanization, antibiotics, I guess you could say modern living in general, right, has caused this bacteria to, I guess you could say, be eaten up or not grow in an environment that is not natural, right? So they've gone to tribes all across the world that still follow the hunter-gatherer way of living, and they all have this bacteria in their stomach, right? So if we're missing this bacteria and it's natural to us, and it's just one bacteria, not to mention Oxalobacter or what's the other one there? Biofilmudum infidus, things like that. If we don't have those things in us, how can we attribute who we are as a person purely to a demonstration or way of being? Like, I'm conscientious or I'm neurotic. It's like, why though? Why are you that person? What gut bacteria do you have? How much sunlight are you getting? How much are you sleeping? What are you sensitive to? Are you supposed to have gluten? Do you have the gut bacteria in your stomach that helps you digest gluten? Do you have Oxalobacter, which helps you break down oxalates, which is carbohydrates, sweet potato, etc., things like that, in your system? So how much of these invisible forces control your life? And I don't mean invisible forces as limiting beliefs. I mean the real, tangible, to the core thing.
Yeah. Things that we just don't think about. And that whole gut biome thing is something that I know the research in that has exploded over the past decade. And I've looked a little bit into it, but Dr. Rhonda Patrick has been on Joe Rogan once or twice, actually many times, and she's talked about it, and it's a fascinating little world. But you're absolutely right. We have to consider all of the contributing factors to a person. It turns out that people are rather complicated, and there can be 20, 30, 40, 50 different things that are going to affect the way that you're thinking, your performance, how you feel, your mental acuity, your focus, all these things. And one thing that I have personally over the past year and a half found really helpful for my focus, for my health, is this. It's become pretty popular, this idea of biohacking. And I've gone, I'll admit, a bit extreme on this front. So I'm actually the guy that has a chest freezer in his closet filled with 35-degree water that I get in daily. But beyond just cold plunging and stuff like that, just hitting the sauna or hitting the gym on a regular basis. Another really big thing that I found to be useful for productivity and focus is I fast every morning. So I won't intake any calories until probably 1 or 2 or 3 p.m. And then even when I do have a meal at around that time, it's normally protein heavy. And that's mainly because I'm really sensitive to carbohydrates, which may be somewhat influenced by gut bacteria. I would imagine it is. And I'll get brain fog really bad. And that's another thing, that certain people they have a higher proclivity to be affected by carbohydrates or not. So all these things are complicated and they have to be looked at from the unique individual perspective. But regardless, I found immense benefit from doing this fasting thing. And it's so interesting. It's such a simple thing to simply just wait to consume calories until 2 or 3 p.m. Just by changing that window of caloric intake, I'm probably 50% more focused in the mornings. And it's been really beneficial for me because I'm more naturally a night owl. So typically mornings are my least productive time period. But I've actually flipped that equation to a certain degree where my mornings are competing with my nights in terms of productivity. Have you experienced or have experimented rather with any of the biohacking methods, anything like that?
I guess I would have a contrarian point of view on the biohacking side of stuff, and
Okay.
contrarian would be an exaggeration, more just like a different way of seeing it, and or just rather a model or a lens to see biohacking through. Now, for me, like I've spent many months, many weeks at the least of my life in experiencing chronic health issues, right? And when I say chronic, again, I'll mention it like spinning out, like to the point where sometimes I have my phone next to me, like ready to call in Australia 000 911 in America, or 311 in the UK or whatever it is, because I'm like, okay, am I gonna fucking pass out here? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pass out. Like it is what it is, you know. That's how bad it is, right? So, and there's lots of people. There's an increasing exponential amount of people who are experiencing this because we're further and further living away from who we are, and who we are is what we are naturally supposed to be. And I don't mean natural in the sense of like, you know, like a paleo diet. I mean natural in the sense of general principles like being in nature, being feet in the dirt, and things like that, which I wouldn't consider biohacking. I consider that natural hacking, for example. So
Sure.
the point I'm making is that
Yep.
I've been through all this. Like I've been through, like anyone who's had health issues, I hear you. I've been through it. I understand it. I go through it from occasionally from now and then, still now. And one of the principles that because life's about principles, sometimes when it's applicable. But one of the principles I got from this journey of life is that there's always a beginning and a middle and an end. There's always three parts, so to speak. And the three parts of this is, are you in deficit? Are you in maintenance? Or are you in growth? Now, what I mean by that, the wording itself doesn't portray what I'm trying to say, but what I mean by that is, if you're in chronic health issues, I wouldn't be doing biohacking. I would not be touching.
Yeah.
So, for example, I tried.
I agree.
I tried to do the cold bath thing, and I've done that heaps before in my life. When I had it in my house, but it made me feel sicker because it activated the part of the body, the autoimmune response, and I had that going already, right? And saunas, I've had moments before where I've had saunas and ice baths, and I've done the both together, like a Russian banya style thing, and I would like feel awfully sick afterwards, even after a light amount. So the principle that I'm trying to espouse, if that's the right word, onto you guys is that know thyself and where one is, and do that through understanding, hey, like I just can't do that yet, because there's a lot of information online about idealistic ways of being healthy or being in the world, or how would you say, acting or performing, or you might listen to Andrew Tate, or I don't know, some motivational person. It's like, no matter what, you go to the gym, discipline's everything. It's like, doesn't matter how you feel, to a degree, right? Then you might hear like biohacking, all these things, awesome stuff, all great stuff, but understand what is the place the person is seeing it from, what is the place you're seeing it from, and what is best for you in this moment. How can I extrapolate that information into what's relevant to my life? So, to give you an example of this, me in a chronic health condition, like spinning out all these things, the best thing that I could have done that moment was give up trying me, as in give up trying just myself, and outsource to someone else. Saying, hey, I'm in a position right now where I'm so like unwell that I can't even think clearly for myself. And if I think I'm thinking clearly, then that's the issue, because I'm not thinking clearly because I need your help. So in situations like that, you need help from someone, right? So then you find like a nutritionist, a naturopath, a professional, right? You find that person and you surrender, you let go, right? And that is the best thing you can do. It's not like push yourself to go to the gym no matter how you feel, and you go to the gym, you're spinning out and you're feeling like crap. It's like, what does one need right now? What do I need right now? It's like, I need support, I need help, I need this, I need that. Or maybe you're in maintenance and you're like, I'm feeling pretty good in my life, but I can feel a bit better. It's like, great, have a cold bath then. Do cold showers in the morning. I do cold showers in the morning now. Or, go for walks, or it might be. Or maybe you're in that like growth phase where you're like, I'm just like, I feel great where I'm at. Like, what's that next level? So you start just experimenting. You have the room to experiment because your health is in such high level. Same with money, right? You have so much money, you have so much excess of resource that you can try and experiment things out, and things can fuck up a bit, right? So I'm gonna take this random supplement like Qualium or something like that and try it out, or like I start taking L-theanine to relax me even more, or I'm gonna take these nootropics, whatever. So again, know oneself and where oneself is at, and then second to that, understand what you can take on. That would be my advice with that.
Yeah. No, you make a very good point. And I would fully agree that if you're trying to pursue something like biohacking when your health is shit, I mean, that's a bad idea. So knowing where you're at, knowing where you're at as a person in terms of health, in terms of relationships, in terms of all those different contributing factors that we talked about are important before you go, okay, I'm going to go max out on deadlift at the gym when you have strep throat. So there's a specificity here that's critical, or you're actually going to be counterproductive in trying to do something that you actually think is productive. So
and
I'm fully
the same
with you
thing
there.
applies with finances as well, and everything in life. Like if you're in debt, you got a credit card debt, and you're I don't know, like not living the place you want to live in. It's just finances are bad, right? And then you see an ad from Grant Cardone, or some website, and you're like, invest in real estate. It's like, dude, like you're not. And see, it's much easier to see that when it's something outside of you, like it's money, right? I've got $30,000 in debt, and I'm wanting to invest in real estate. It's like, bro, like, firstly, pay off that debt. It's going to take time. Like that's the thing, right? Like my health journey, I've spent, and this is in AUD, and I'll tell you the USD amount, but I've spent probably $2,000 AUD, about 3,500 in USD on my health journey, on supplements, on all these things. This is just from when I was seeing someone, right? And it's been 4 months now. It's a long journey. It's been 4 months, and I was 0.5 out of 10. Now I'm probably 6 or 7 out of 10, maybe 7.5, 8 sometimes. And it's a journey. Some days I'm like amazing, some days I'm low. So again, like same point I was making before, it's like know thyself, know where oneself is at, and also know how much time it's going to take, because things take fucking time. Building a business takes time. Getting your health right takes time. Money takes time. You can't have it all now. It's going to take sometimes years, at least years for that like growth phase. And it's like, just accept where you are. It's like, hey, I'm just this person right now. This is how it's going to be for the next 3 to 6 months. So yeah, there's great power in surrender is what I'm saying. And surrendering is okay. You're not less of a man or less of a woman because, Andrew Tate's telling you, or whoever it is, like, be high value. Not that he says that, but, be like a multimillionaire and approach every single chick you see, or like become the most attractive version. It's like, yeah, I can do that, but it's going to take time. And I surrender to the process. That's where magic happens. And that's where real beauty is experienced, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, good word. Good word. Yeah. Not becoming obsessed with the principle or obsessed with the ideal, but recognizing that the situation that you're in is relevant to actually reaching that goal or subscribing to that individual principle, for sure. So we've talked a lot about, these different health effects, different mindsets, all these kind of things, which are all good. But one thing that I've encountered is that without a deeper reason as to why you're doing what you're doing, without some toe into the religious dimension, let's say, without having at least been wrestling with those questions and come out with some kind of answer that you can get behind, that's always a process. So of course you're not going to be ever done with that line of questioning. But without that, I noticed that, at least when I was younger, I wasn't able to pursue things wholeheartedly because I was still wrestling with things that had to do with my purpose, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and all those kind of things. And I've gone through quite the long religious journey, and this is somewhat of a tangent, but is relevant here. Is I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and the title's very apt here, by Viktor Frankl. and Frankl lived through the Nazi concentration camps. And one thing that he focused on, and he was actually a psychotherapist, so this was very relevant to him, was that the famous quote that Nietzsche said, which is, you can bear any how with the proper why. And if you have that why, you can conquer anything. But if you don't have it, you're going to fail. And I'm curious for you, do you think that you've been able to find that why? Do you think you've been able to find that purpose behind what you're doing? And of course it is a journey. So I would never expect, if it's not a journey, if you think you have it, you've missed the point. But finding that reason as to why you're doing what you're doing is huge. What do you think about that? How's that been for you?
I think that the how to the why, like how to get to the why, is important to mention here, which I want to touch on. But honestly, like in the sense of sounding plain or perhaps male, like for me, the most important, like, there's two things that came up, right? And I'm gonna trust, right? Because intuition's important, right? It's important under the lens of objective analysis. I think it's a combination of both. It's a dance, right? But I'm just gonna go with my intuition here. The first two things that came up for me that resonated with me, that felt right, was firstly to create something beautiful, like art. I love the science and the messiness of art, and so beauty, right? And what that means to me is, like, it can be as simple as creating a post online that has science behind it, but there's an element of creativity or like flow or rhythm to the video. Like when I was creating my content, I felt that rhythm, I felt that flow, I felt the, if I changed something here, it changed the whole flow of the post. Then also as well, like just wanting to be someone who is it sounds shallow, but it's I think it's what we're all doing. We just deny it. It's like wanting to be a person of good value, wanting to be someone of good esteem, right? And what that means to me is like having things in order. And of course, there's the proverbial boxes which order sits in and that chaos then surrounds. But for the most part, like for me, it's just getting my money in order, getting my intellect in order, getting, looking inwards at the parts of me that I blame others for, perhaps pointing the finger out when I'm doing the same thing and getting those things straight. It's like, where am I trying to, like, lying, that's a whole different thing. Like, but I mean, managing perception. Where am I trying to change how I say things to manage a perception of who I really am? Or where am I downplaying who I am? Where am I pretending to be someone I'm not? Like, when am I dumbing myself down? And where am I not allowing myself to just be arrogant or be like truthful about who I am? It's like, so what it really is, it's a finding out of the crinkles, so to speak, of my life. And that's what excites me. That's what gets me going, and in that, the creation of content. And that could have been, 300 years ago painting, but now it's digital art, it's the videos. And, many sides to me, man. I think that's my why. And I think there's multiple whys, as there always is, and that's the tricky part about whys. But the first one for me is creating something beautiful, creating money and finances to then give back and then do awesome things and live a life that's unhinged, or perhaps rather unrestricted, not unhinged. That's it for me. But I want to mention on the why thing, the why, I just want to say, like, what came up for me as well is that it's important that one can't find a why without adequate contemplation. Let me rephrase that. One can't find, or re-say it, one can't find a why without adequate contemplation, right? Meaning we are so caught up in the mirror of reflection of other people on social media and of everyday life that when we're in life, we often lose ourselves in it. So to find who we really are, we need to take time to contemplate. And contemplation takes time away from what you're addicted to, scrolling your phone, those brief moments. Like spending 30 minutes each day to contemplate, and not contemplating on anything specifically, but rather opening the Pandora's box of your mind and of your body and of nature. And that's where you find the real why. It's when the why is found in the absence of doing. It's not found in the pursuit of doing itself.
Yeah. It sounds very similar to the idea of meditation, and obviously there's many different forms, so I don't want to put any boxes around things here, but yeah, that concept of people often struggle to be alone with their own thoughts, and it's something that I've tried to become better at, to really understand. It's easy to get distracted. You brought up the phone example. It's easy to be so busy with things that you're actually blinding yourself to what's really going on. But being alone, taking a moment to step back, taking a moment to reflect on who you are, what you're doing, what's going on in the world, what matters to you, is critical, or you won't be able to find that why if you don't actually take that step back. So I think that's a really good word there. The phenomenon of beauty is fascinating in this concept, because it's truly uniquely human. Well, I would assume so. I haven't asked my dog about it, but I imagine that they don't find they might think a particular bone is beautiful, but it's a fascinating thing that we find, and it's rather subjective too. This concept of beauty, and it's such a unique thing, and it's cool to hear you say that you've kind of found within the context of content creation, within the context of making things look good, making things look beautiful, flow well, that you've found a lot of meaning in that. And it's, I guess, somewhat, maybe it's counterintuitive. I guess you would say it's more niche than anything else, not necessarily counterintuitive. But as a form of art, as a form of something that you're pursuing, that's pretty cool to hear. So, what's your similar topic? What's your religious background?
Ooh, we're going there, are we?
Yeah, we are.
Great, let's do it. Religious background. So I went to a Pentecostal church when I was 10 years old to when I was 14 or 15 years old. And stepping into adolescence, I felt like I didn't want to go anymore. And my dad attempted to force me to go. Like, you have to go. Like, it is, you have to do it. And that's where my kind of journey with it ended. The rest of it was, I could never sit with the idea of, let's just dive straight in, but I could never sit with the idea of, it's too undefined for me. And I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that that's right, nor am I saying that that's an adequate enough reason. But it just feels too gooey, right? It just feels too messy, and there's not like definables. And it bothers me because I don't like to base my reality in subjective truths. At least I try not to. Of course, like, you can point out many things where I'm doing that. It's like, obviously I'm doing that. And again, you could say, well, religion is faith, and faith is the absence of evidence. It's like, sure, well, where I'm doing that everywhere in my life, I get it. But to then give it to a certain, so religion being the defining word, to then give it to a certain deity in a religion, or multiple deities, then I don't feel comfortable with that. It doesn't feel right for me. Do I believe in the grandiose and the esoterical and that which is undefinable? Of course. How can you not? But I don't attribute to any specific religion. One of the things that I often say when someone says, they mention God or like something about God, then I say, which God?
Yep.
They get so offended. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but which one? Like, there's so many. And it's like, you shouldn't be offended, because just because you feel like there's one that's suited towards your particular upbringing or perhaps mentality doesn't mean that I then have to assume that you are of that nature. Yeah. So, like, which God do you believe in? That's the thing.
It's a good question. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. There's this old Jewish idea that the more tightly that you try to define God, the more that you lose the essence of God. And I think that somewhat goes to what you were saying, that these things are, these metaphysical concepts, the concept of God, the concept of spirits or deities, etc., are beyond our comprehension to a certain extent. And the more that we assume that we fully understand them, or the more that we assume that we have the perfect way of describing them, or the perfect definition, or that putting things in a box misses the point. And that's something that's always struck me as a mistake on the part of more traditional religious structures. And your question about, like, well, which God? It's a very good question. I'll get the question often. I didn't ask you, but do you believe in God? And I don't really like that question, because it's assuming a number of things. A, that you and I have the same definition of belief, because that's a very complicated term in and of itself. And the even more complicated part of that statement is God. And like you said, which one? What do you mean by God? These are very complicated subjects. One thing that I appreciate about Peterson is that he's tried to put some of these more, what seem to be archaic or rigid ideas about religion and God in psychological and practical terms. And that's been very useful for me to view the domain of religion less as, whether you go to church on Sunday or not, and more as a domain of values in trying to pursue something meaningful and worthwhile. And in that, I found a lot of, let's say, solace, a lot of peace, in that it's less about what you say or what you know, and it's more about how you live. It's more about trying to pursue something worthwhile. And I think that's more at the core of what religion is. And hearing you say that you're finding passion in things, that's what I look for in people. That's why I'm like, man, that's so cool to hear. That brings me a huge amount of joy to see this person pursuing something that they find meaningful. So I guess that's kind of, it was a bit of a broad description there, but pursuing what is meaningful, pursuing something that you find a passion about, I think is huge. And that, I think, is one of the core tenets of religion that maybe people kind of forget about, that value dimension. What do you think about that?
Well, it's just like, at what point does the definition become removed in the analysis of it? Now, what I mean by that is, like, if you want to speak to religion and, what is religion, at a certain point, it's like, let me just scale it back even further. It's like, for me, when I think about the religions of the world, I see certain values being held onto in the absence of logic. Sure. And I see it as a cop-out sometimes. Perhaps I'm more like a Sam, and I don't want to be, and I don't saying that I am. I'm just, based on what I'm saying, I sound like Sam Harris, like, who's...
Big fan, by the way.
Everything has... Yeah, like, I just don't... For me, like, so when someone says, oh, I had a spiritual experience, it's like, yeah, and, like, I've had tons of spiritual experiences in meditation, and I've had weeks of being in what they call satori, like, in that enlightened state.
Yeah.
And I think it's insulting to break that down to God. It's just so simplistic and so, like, it's like, I get it, I understand, like, what that means, but it's like, it's God, and also here's the neurochemistry in the brain. Here's
sure.
It's low resolution thinking, in my opinion, and it's just like a cop out sometimes for someone to say, like, oh, like, it's God. It's like, sure, I hear you in that. I hear that experience and that feeling of that, and like that wavy esotericness, and I love that. But also don't discount the fact that, perhaps a part of your brain was active and this happened. But then, right, then that person would say, but then where's it all lead to? It has to be God. It's like, no, it doesn't. Just because it's like what Richard Dawkins calls the God of the gaps, right? And I don't know, I'm not saying I do or don't believe in this. I'm just sharing ideas. It's like, you can't follow something to the nth degree and say you don't understand it and then attribute something even less understandable to that lack of understanding. It's like, I'm going to explain to you the psychology behind X, Y, Z and the biology and all these things and tell you what I don't know. Like, I don't know, like, again, so here's an example, right? Lactobacillus, and I'm just going to tie this in and go super random here.
Sure.
Lactobacillus reuteri, the gut bacteria in your stomach that we are missing, a lot of us are missing, it helps you to have more vivid dreams in your sleep, right? So then what's not to say that those, you can have more vivid experiences in reality, but then if you don't have that bacteria, does that mean you're less connected to God? Because you're having less vivid experiences? Like, so I can't, if someone can help me move past the part of like the rationality or the lack of rationality, or the irrationality, I should say, of using religion or God or a deity as a bypass to think things through more deeply, then I'd happily explore it. But I see every single situation in my life of someone putting onto God as a way to not define the truth. Sure, does it help you let go? Yes. Sure, does it help you have trust and faith and perhaps be a healthier person? Yes. But be honest with that. Like, I believe in God because it gives me faith and it helps me not worry about things. And I know it's irrational, but that's how I like to do it because that's what I need for my life. It's like, great, cool. Not like, no, it's God, you don't understand it. It's like, I know something that you don't know. And that's my issue with it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to be honest about the not knowing piece is huge. That's one thing that I've encountered. Just be real about it. Like, look, I'm not claiming that I have all the answers. This is the way that I'm placing faith in this concept, in this deity, but I'm recognizing that trying to prove that rationally to you is a lost cause. And then me getting mad at you for not agreeing with me about this is ridiculous. So that recognition of it's something beyond our understanding is critical, or again, it's back to this idea, like you're losing the essence of the thing.
And also the bias towards a certain religion. It's like, so if I went to someone who, and this might upset some people, it's like if I went to someone who was Jehovah's Witness, right? And it's like, tell me why I should, like what benefits I'll have about being a part of you guys, so to speak, or a part of your belief system. Give you the reasons, like, great, can I find that Christianity, or can I find that perhaps better example in being a Buddhist? It's like, no, you can't. It's like, have you been a Buddhist before? Have you been Jehovah's Witness? Have you been all these different things? And also, you're not the same person as other people. So it's like, there's so many variables. So how can you say that this is the answer? This is the way to go. This is the one thing you need to do. It's like, we are individual human beings, a part of a collective system of human beings, collective consciousness. And correct, right? And we are trying to, and religions are trying to get, in my experience, get a person to convert to one set of ways of being, which is just so rigid. The world is far too wiggly and messy and ever-changing for one book or one set of philosophies to rule amongst all. In fact, the people that are even a part of those religions don't always hold true to them. They then bend them to their own will, right? Their own way of being. So if you said to me, like, I'm ex-religion, it's like, great, do you do all the things that it says to do? It's like, well, no. Then they play mental gymnastics on those parts. Like, that was in the Old Testament. We follow the New Testament. Sometimes, right? But some are extremists, right?
Certainly.
Extremism isn't good because there's some nasty shit in there, but at least they're being true to what their religion is.
Fair enough.
So it's like, it's too messy for me. It's too like, there's too many like, and messiness in my mind. And this is maybe like where it comes down to like, perhaps maybe something inside of me that I need to look at or maybe heal or whatever, is it leaves too much room for people to be nefarious with their intentions. So I can make you, or not make you, I can persuade you to do things in the name of God, and you can't object to them because the lines are too blurred.
Yeah, there's an argument from authority there.
Yeah. So yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, there's a, whenever people make reference to God says this or verse 5 says this, therefore do this, it's assuming that I would subscribe to, well, A, your version of whatever you're claiming, and then B, that I would subscribe to the authority of whatever thing that you're referencing. And those are two big steps that I think are massive errors. And you're talking about the abandonment of rationality, the abandonment of logic. And one thing that I've tried to do, and you should be worried about abandoning those, by the way, but one thing that I've tried to do is I've tried to look at religious systems, specifically Christianity, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, and look and see, okay, well, where does the the ethic, the value, the morality that they're touching on, where do I see good in that, and then how can I apply that to my life? And that's a very different thing than I go to church on Sunday or I say certain things with my mouth. It's a very different thing. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I guess, and obviously we've opened up a big box, so there's a lot of complexity here. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about. But regardless, I found a lot of usefulness from a pragmatic perspective, from a life perspective, from a meaning perspective of, okay, where are these principles in Hinduism? Where are these principles in Buddhism and Christianity that I can apply to my life and growth as a person? And I think that's been very useful for me. So,
yeah, I love that, man, and I could definitely apply it to my life as well. And I guess the mental block for me was that it's I can't find those principles clearly laid out except for when I want to see them in a certain way. I guess for me, like my archetype as far as characterology goes, which is more esoteric, and not saying I believe in that, is I'm more of a rigid person, meaning that I need to have it laid out clearly for me to want to believe in it. So clearly, of course, there's always a degree of unclearness inside of said topic or whatever. But if I read a science article that's peer-reviewed and that's, gone through multiple trials or where it might be, and perhaps less than that, but in the case of maybe a systematic review of something, right, I can put more faith into that because I know that it's been backed by experience and evidence. And you could say the same thing about religious texts, but there's still confirmation bias inherent inside of that, as there is with everything, but less is better for me.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my kind of trepidation with it.
No, I got you. Yeah, it's complicated stuff, for sure. So appreciate you talking about it though. Let's switch gears here. One big thing I want to touch on before we end is the introduction of AI into everything, but more specifically social media, because that's kind of your bread and butter. And I'll just make a couple. I'll think out loud for a second. I want to hear what you think about this. I'm pretty off the deep end on AI. I'm pretty convinced that it's going to be absolutely revolutionary in the next decade or two. And one of the things that I think is going to happen is the mass proliferation of deepfakes. And I assume you're familiar with that concept. And that one thing that Alex Hormozy brought up on Chris Williamson the other day, I was just listening to this idea of the check mark, on Twitter, like you're verified. Soon that will become much more important in the context of verifying whether something's AI made or human made. And I mean, this is a giant box, but what do you think about AI in terms of like social media and content creation and deepfakes and all that kind of stuff?
I want to start by saying I don't know.
Yes. That's a good beginning right there. Yep. Very good beginning.
I don't know. And also my hunch is that real content, right? So a lot of people come to me, like when I say, like, what do you do for work? It's like, oh, I do content. It's like, AI is coming for your job. It's like, okay, there's something inside of that, right? And what's inside that is people, no matter what, right? Unless we start integrating with, we become cyborgs in a way, which we kind of already are with our phones.
Yeah,
but another conversation. People always value authenticity, right? No matter what. And I don't mean just in the lens of digital, but I mean the lens of just life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so inside of humanity, I'm gonna go full circle here, right? So my theory is that the reason that a man is attracted to a female typically is because they have integrity, right? They have congruence, which is where your thoughts, words, and actions are aligned. Now, the reason that's attractive, in my opinion, in my experience, is that women don't have to spend any time, any mental bandwidth on managing or micromanaging a perception of you that you're trying to put forward. So you have certain characteristics and ways of being that are just, generally speaking, attract to women, right? Like having your finances sorted. Perhaps maybe, what's another one? Like, I don't know, maybe being a certain height, Of course, everyone's different. Everyone likes different things. Whatever. I'm just saying, generally speaking, there's characteristics, and there's actually a paper on this with some guy who studied this, like the actual the science behind it. But like things like that, and also like people speak good about you. You have a tight network. You have resources. Women are attracted to that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the most attractive, right? And then the second, or probably the most equally attractive, is when they don't have to think about who you say you are. So you have the high level stuff. It's like, I have money, all these kind of things. Then there's demonstrations of that, like look at my house, look at my car. But then there's sub-communications that lead to the truth of that, like confidence or speaking a certain way, a certain tonality, your eye movements, how you use your body language, all these things. Not to get people paranoid about how you speak, because these are just all small things. But when you're pretending to be something that you're not, right, then people, not just women, but I mean women specifically, because they're more in tune with that, because they're going to have to invest like a couple of years into a person when they have a child, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. They know when someone is not right for them, when they are taking mental bandwidth to think about whether or not they should be with that person or around that person. It's like, oh, I like that person. Something's just off about them, though. They might go there because they see the mental, like, this person's got X, Y, Z. There's something off, because there's something off about who they're being. So they put that back into AI. What we're going to see, in my opinion, is the divergence of, so what the fuck is the point of a blog post written by ChatGPT? Right now, it's a great time saver because no one's really going to notice. But what happens when everyone's doing that? What's going to stand out? Authenticity. And is AI going to get so good that it'll be exactly the same as a human, and you can't even tell the micro expressions? You can't even tell like how authentic someone is, or like if that's actually them or not? Definitely will get to that point. Mm-hmm. Not straight away. But when it does, if there's a tick next to that saying like this is actually a real person, that's going to be like,
yeah,
because it's going to matter, right? So that's why I saw someone say something about like going if you're getting your tick, what a vanity metric. It's like no, you don't understand. Like this is a step forward to a certain way of being, a certain reality. It's such low resolution thinking to be like, oh, it's a vanity metric. Yeah, and it also allows you to say like this is actually really me, and I'm certified. This is me. This is not some random account, whatever. So full circle again, right? So if what we value as humans, and specifically women, is authenticity, and in our conversations, like, and just think about this, guys. If anyone listening, when you're out in the street walking around, and you meet someone, and you don't know their intentions, like say, I hate to use this as an example, but it's just true. A homeless person walks up to you. You know what their intentions are. You're like, whoa, like, I don't know. Generally speaking, I'm not talking about the exceptions to the rule. Generally speaking, you're going to be standoffish because you don't know what their intentions are. Do they really just want money? Do they want to rob you? Do they want to do these things? I'm not saying that's what homeless people do. I'm just saying, well, I mean, yeah, there's a reason why people feel that way.
I know what you mean. Yep.
So what I'm saying is that the authentic you, virtually and also in real person, is of high value. So I wouldn't worry about, AI. I wouldn't worry about those things too much in the sense of, what if it takes my job? Of course it's going to take your job. But I mean in the sense of you being you. Authenticity and digital presence is coming more closer to just being a human in real life. Mm. If you see some like pixelated blob walking around the street, you're like, what the fuck is that? It's like a real person is a real person. And that's going to become closer to us in the digital space, I believe. But let's see.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And this, I think, also correlates with the fact that there's been a rise of independent media in a way that the old guard, the old mainstream media just can't keep up with. People are craving someone that's going to be honest with them. I think that also is part of the reason that podcasts have taken off, because it's this unscripted hour-plus long conversation where someone is authentic and real. They're not behind...
It's easy to see if they're real.
Yeah, they're not behind a media screen where everything's scripted, every minute matters, everything you say has got to be checkmarked before you can say it. There's just something authentic about that. And I would agree with you. It's certainly going to become more prolific, and there's going to be more AI-generated content. But what do I care more about? I care more about a person's genuine opinion, even if it's messy, even if there's things that don't make sense in it, I want the real thing. I don't want the fake version of them talking. So it's a fascinating discussion, but I would agree with you. I think integrity, I think authenticity is going to win. Now, there's another part of that, which is the problem of deepfakes, which we somewhat touched on, which is you're going to have the issue of actually trying to figure out what is real and what isn't, and the detection machines that are going to be trying to figure out if it was AI generated or not, which has all sorts of implications. And then people are going to have specific channels that they're like, okay, only content coming out from this is really me. Anything else is suspect and stuff like that. And there's some fascinating things with that. But yeah, authenticity is huge. So any closing thoughts on that or anything else? I think we're going to wrap up here soon.
No closing thoughts off the top of my head, but no, I think we covered most stuff, man. I just, if anyone listening, I just want to share the message of, some of the stuff we said there, which is just recognize where you're at, know where you're at, and it's okay to be in a place that you're not, but it takes accepting being in that place before you can move on to the next stage of your life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that's relevant right now. It's just coming up as what's important to share. And yeah, just keep building. Just those 1%ers, just those 0.05 1%ers. But first, know thyself to make progress. And that means contemplation, analysis. And I don't mean always writing. I mean going for walks, thinking about who you are as a person, thinking about where you might have gone wrong, where you've gone right, and just fully embracing all parts of you, and not as some like pseudo happy, positive bumper sticker vibe. I mean purely just like learning to embrace the dark and the good, because there's dark and good in all of us. So that's my message.
Yeah, no, for sure. Appreciate it. Give out your socials. Where can people find you?
We might have to cut this bit out. There's just someone at my door, but I'll keep talking, but it's okay. So my socials, you can find me just my full name. So Luke, R-A-Y, N for Nelly, H for Harry, A for Alpha, M for Michael. And just search me on Instagram. You'll find me. And you know where to find it. If you need help with your social media and creating epic content that engages people, that's authentic, that's real, that's you, visit my website, getpersonified.co.
Cool. Hey, man, thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Really cool conversation.
Absolute pleasure, man.
Wish you the best.
Awesome. Thanks, bro. I appreciate it.